illness and loss of life by the rapid spread of the COVID-19 virus, I, Ryan Castro, the chair of the West Jordan Board of Adjustment, having determined that conducting board meetings at the City Hall or at another anchor location is likely to contribute to the spread of COVID-19 and would present a substantial risk to the health, safety, and welfare of the city's residents, participants, and observers. Therefore, pursuant to Utah Code 52-4-2074, Board of Adjustment meetings of this public body will be held only electronically, and this determination shall expire 30 days from the date the chair of the Board of Adjustment signs the written determination, signed by myself, December 16th. And with that, I will open up our pre-meeting, either to discussion or presentation from city staff.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to remind that we won't necessarily go over the application in this pre-meeting, because what it is it is a variance this evening that you're actively hearing. And that is, in state law, that's kind of an appeal mechanism. I don't even know if it's an appeal, it's a safety valve for the literal enforcement of the zoning ordinance if the applicant can prove hardship. And the hardship needs to be created by the lot and not necessarily by the applicant. You can't variance a use. So if someone was applying for they wanted to put a bar in the middle of a residential zone and they sought a variance under state law, there's no such thing as a use variance. Use tables are what you would follow in the zoning ordinance. And so in granting the variance, the applicant needs to prove that there's hardship, and they need to establish hardship before the variance can be issued by the Board of Adjustment. And I believe that recently you've gone through this last week with our last meeting, I should say, with the dance studio. I believe that's what they're applying for, is a variance. And so what you need to do is listen to the applicant, have them present to you the evidence that they believe exists, so that they can prove hardship. It is up to them to prove that. It's not staff's job to prove that. It's not any member of the Board of Adjustment's job to prove that. It is under our code. It is the burden of proof is upon the applicant. And so Mark will be here tonight, and Mark's done a great job with his staff report, and he will be here. And Julie just texted me a message. Julie, I know this is for the lot, the 10,000 square foot lot. I'm just going over the variances generally. And so Mark won't be arguing for the applicant. He'll just be presenting information as the Board of Adjustment sees necessary. So I would try to get out of the applicant why they feel this is appropriate and why that they have a hardship upon the property. And the test, would be literal enforcement of this title will cause an unreasonable hardship for them. And what I was always taught is if there's a lot that's created on a hillside and it makes it impossible to meet the front yard setback because this hill is pushing the building forward, that's an unreasonable hardship, because it is associated with the property for the variance, what the variance is sought, and it comes with circumstances peculiar to the property and not conditions general in the neighborhood. So remember that just because it's a piece of property, it could be just like everything else. There's nothing, and so what you need to look for is if it's something unique that is making this property a hardship for the owner. There are special circumstances to the property that don't apply to other properties in the neighborhood or in that zone. In this case, it'll be in the R110 zone. Or what are the special circumstances of this property? Granting the variance is essential to the enjoyment of a substantial property right. And so in a neighborhood, I'd like the substantial property right is that everyone in that area is allowed to have a single family dwelling. It doesn't mean that they have the right to have an auto body shop or a paint shop or a tow yard in their backyard. The right that they possess in that is a residential use and quiet enjoyment of their property. So is this variance necessary for that? The variance will not substantially affect the general plan or is contrary to the public interest. Would granting a variance, would that do harm to the general plan? Would it change what the general plan has envisioned for that area? In this case, it's single family residential. And the spirit of the title is observed and substantial justice done. And so if you can find that it really meets the spirit of what the Board of Adjustment meets for, then that's when you grant hardship. And the one last thing I want to add is it's very important that we make certain that the hardship, is not self-imposed or it's not based just solely upon economic reasons. If I get this variance, I can subdivide this property and I can make twice as much as what I've got now. That's not the purpose of a variance. That's not the purpose, and that's not a hardship. That's just a reality of the market. And so on that, and Jared, I don't know if you want to add anything from a legal perspective as far as establishing hardship goes in this case.
No.
Okay, and so
Larry, you mentioned that you said in the spirit of the rest of the project or the rest of the surrounding area, that would be that could be considered a hardship.
Well, to establish hardship, all 5 of these tests needs to be met, not just one of them. So you need to look at A through E and make sure that all 5 of those are met. The spirit of the title, go back to the hillside with the house on it.
Right. I remember we had one exactly like that.
We did. The hills, the spirit of that is that it's a single family neighborhood, and the spirit of the law would be allowed to, or that person to build a single family home on that property because it was platted that way through the subdivision. That was the intent of the general plan. And so while it does not meet the letter of the law, it can't meet a 30-foot front yard setback. In that case, it can meet a 15-foot. And so the spirit of the law is really justified.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Okay.
Criteria number 4 mentions the general plan and the public interest. Could staff comment on how we as members of the Board of Adjustment, how much we are expected to know about the general plan and where we would get that information?
I think that for this case, what you'd be looking at is the general plan land use map. And in this case, what the land use map has envisioned for this area is single family housing. So if you were, hypothetically to grant a variance somehow for allowing some type of multifamily in there, then it would violate the spirit of, or the general plan, what's envisioned for that area. So that's as simply as I can put it. Yes.
As members of the Board of Adjustment, though, our knowledge of the general plan would generally come just from you, right?
Yes, correct. And the staff report. Mm-hmm.
And would probably be addressed in the staff report. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Contrary to the public interest, I think those two they go hand in hand, because that is the plan that has been passed by the city council, recommended by the planning commission. So that is the public interest in that area. And what that is saying is the board doesn't have the authority to override that document with things that are contrary to the general plan. So, you know, and the one thing, and the reason it's important to make sure the hardship is established is that if not, then the Board of Adjustment could be seen as amending an ordinance, you know, not really amending an ordinance, but really taking a legislative action on, because you're giving something special to someone that is not approved by the legislative body of the city. But state law and our ordinance does allow the establishment of hardship for a variance. And so as long as you can establish that hardship, then it's all right to grant a variance. So.
You have an R1, R110B zone, right? At this
Yeah.
point. So that just means 10,000 square foot and a B-size home. Now, this lot's going to be cut down to how many square feet?
I'd
It'll
probably
be 10,000 is what they're proposing.
Okay.
Now there is a little bit of a discrepancy with their site plan and kind of what we've measured on the city's parcel map, but I'll go over that later.
Just kind of a clarification. How much instruction or preparation has the applicant received in understanding their obligations to prepare for this meeting?
Mostly just what they've been given with the application. So the questionnaire that's listed on there.
I also let the applicant know that they're expected to present their case when I send out a copy of the staff report.
Right. Yeah, and I've told them that too.
Okay. I think that's just, I've spoken a little bit with Jared about it, but I think it's important that we set the expectations properly for citizens so they get the best possible outcome and we, you know, their expectations are met, or they come into it with the right expectation, I should say. Which it sounds like you've done that. Just for long-term, making sure that they're informed and well prepared. I don't know if there's something we can modify to our process or documentation to ensure they have the best chance of a good outcome in their favor, if possible, you know. And
you know, the application really is, it's pretty detailed on it, is their obligation or it's their burden of proof to establish this in front of the Board of Adjustment. Now, as you saw last meeting, that applicant had an attorney present for them. I'm not saying that all variances need to have attorneys, but it probably would behoove some people to have that because they understand the law. They're very talented in working with through this law and this system. It can be a little bit confusing on what the state means by the 5 tests of hardship, and so. But that being said, I don't know what this applicant is going to have tonight, and so we will just see. So.
Great. George, Bill, are you guys good with where we're at right now? I have some additional questions regarding another agenda item, but I want to make sure you guys are comfortable with where we're at.
I am.
I am, yes. My question's been answered. Thank you.
Cool. I think my question was around item number 1, election of chair and vice chair. I legitimately don't remember if the new chair takes responsibility for the meeting immediately or not. I'm pretty sure that's not the case, and I conclude the meeting regardless of the outcome, but I just want a clarification, Jared, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. I don't know what they've done in the past. I think that it can be handled either way. I guess it's all in a matter of how you'd like to do it. But yeah, you're good to do it that way.
And then item number 3, having been withdrawn, does it make sense to still mention that as a matter of record when we get to the actual meeting? It feels like it does.
Yes,
Okay.
my opinion.
Great.
Let me ask a question. There are 3 of us tonight. Are we missing? Who are we missing? And
So Dallin isn't on yet. I did send him a reminder email. He was he said that he could be in attendance.
okay.
And then I don't think everybody else knows, or maybe I did say that Mark Warner had resigned his position. And so they are looking for replacements. And if you know of anybody who might be interested, you have them contact the mayor's office to see about, applying for a position.
Can I apply for both seats and just occupy 2 seats, or is that?
I think that's allowed. Yes. No, just kidding.
May I ask another question? Being new to this boards, I know there's a lot of, having been on other boards, there's a lot of variability in how you might answer this, but how nitpicky do you want or need us to be relative to approval of previous meeting minutes?
That's up to you. I think that if it's agreed, something is put in there that is that has your name behind it and says you said that, and do you know for a fact you didn't say that because you weren't there, then that should be pointed out. If it's grammatical, I will leave that up to the board on how they want to, how nitpicky they really want to get with that type of thing. But
Is that amendable? The reason I
the minutes should be accurate and they should reflect what was discussed.
But what I really meant was, can you say that?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, then somebody else is talking for you. So.
Yeah.
My understanding, I think for a more concrete answer, George, is the minutes are meant to represent the spirit of the conversation and the facts as they were portrayed and communicated. And so if you're missing a significant portion of the conversation that adds context and detail, we should make sure that that's noted.
And I believe also if you're establishing findings of any type that need to proceed to an appeal body, make sure that the conversation reflects the findings. If some reason that gets left out, then I would flag that immediately because it should be consistent.
So you don't want me correcting punctuation and spelling?
That's up to you. That's up
If
to
you,
the board.
yeah, and if you see something like that before the meeting, you can always let me know, and then I can have it updated for the meeting if it's just spelling.
In my experience, Julie doesn't make mistakes like that.
Well,
so
I
don't know
must
the way it
have.
No, I just know that from previous experience that some board members would do that, and it kind of would make me crazy. So we'll try not to do that.
that's a little bit too hands-on.
Chairman, I see that the applicant has their hand raised. I know that, it's not against the rules to let people speak in this meeting. I know it's not a public hearing, but do you want me to?
Yeah, let's actually, I think I'm fine with that. Let's see here. Give me just 1 second.
Okay.
So we'll just, sorry,
Yeah.
Julie, what was that?
So I've allowed them,
Okay.
I've opened them up. So if you call them.
So our attendee, participant, Alicia Aldridge, welcome to our pre-meeting. So you're welcome to interact here. So this is primarily establishing the purpose of our future meeting and making sure that we understand the rules and context that govern the future meeting. But we're happy to have you here. And how can we help?
Thank you. It's actually Brennan. My wife, Alicia, is on the account as Alicia. But sorry, I didn't mean to crash your meeting. I just wanted to make sure that my audio was working, that I was prepared for the meeting when it begins.
Great. Yeah, I think that's terrific. And you sound fantastic.
Great, thank you.
Did you say it was Brennan?
Yes, Brennan. I am curious about the position that you mentioned that was open. I know that sounds funny, but
just contact the mayor's office.
what does it entail?
So the Board of Adjustment, as you've seen here, is responsible for determining whether or not a specific application qualifies for a variance from stated code. And we use that using specific criteria outlined by state law. I mean, you're about to go through that process, as you can see. So the board does have additional responsibilities, I believe, as the city's appeals board as well, but we won't be using that function this evening.
Okay, thank you.
And we'd love to have you.
Well, I'm in the industry, so I'm not an attorney by any means, but I am an architect. So it's my language. I think it could be interesting.
Part of the benefit of, well, I won't say that in the pre-meeting. Just
you don't want it on record, huh?
Yeah. But yeah, like Julie said, I would encourage you to reach out to the mayor's office if that's a function you'd like to have interest in performing.
I would also, I think that's, it sounds like you've got a bit of a background there too, so that might be a benefit to all of us.
They're also looking for members for the design review committee as well, or a member that needs to have some kind of experience as a professional in architecture or planning, that type of thing.
When is that application? When do the applications need to be in for that, Julie?
I don't know that they've opened it officially yet, but
Oh.
I'm sure that if anybody had interest, they would take down the information.
I think I'd possibly be interested in doing that. I served on that before as a planning commissioner, so.
I think that concludes any discussion items that we had for the pre-meeting. Unless anybody has anything else, I'm happy to accept a motion to conclude the meeting.
I'll make that motion.
George, you're on mute, but I saw your mouth move to say
I
I'll second.
second it.
Motion put forward to adjourn the pre-meeting by Mr. Heiner and seconded by Mr. Nguyen. All in favor indicate with an aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? And that is, motion carries 3-0 and the pre-meeting is adjourned.
I don't know what I've done. I've lost everybody. You can
You're still here.
me, right?
We can hear you. That's what you get for playing solitaire while we were meeting.
Oh, I've got two computers going here. I can't walk and chew gum at the same time.
Brennan, if you don't mind, as simply a point of order and procedure, we'll probably move you back to the traditional attendees and then bring you back in as when it's your opportunity to present.
I'm going to slip out for a minute.
technology item.
I take it we're obligated to wait till 5:30 to begin.
Yes.
All right, I show that it is 4:30. Julie, does that look good to you? Or 4:30, 5:30?
Yes, that's what I have.
Okay. So we will call this West Jordan Board of Adjustment meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, January 12th. And before we continue with the meeting, I will read the following statement. Due to the increased threat of serious illness and loss of life by the rapid spread of the COVID-19 virus, I, Ryan Castro, the chair of the West Jordan Board of Adjustment, have determined that conducting board meetings at the City Hall or at another anchor location is likely to contribute to the spread of COVID-19 and would present a substantial risk to the health, safety, and welfare of the city's residents, participants, and observers. Therefore, pursuant to Utah Code 52-4-2074, Board of Adjustment meetings of this public body will be held only electronically, and this determination shall expire 30 days from the date the chair of the Board of Adjustment signs the written determination. Signed by myself, Ryan Castro, December 16th, 2020. Continuing on with our meeting here, like to state for the record the attendance of Mr. George Wynn and Mr. Bill Heiner, Board of Adjustment representatives, or Board of Adjustment members, as well as city staff, Jared Tingy, city attorney, Larry Gardner, city planner, and Mark Forsyth, assistant planner. I think that's right, pretty sure that's right. And with that, we will move here to item number 1. Item number 1 is election of chair and vice chair for 2021. Traditionally, we have used this process in a nomination and accepting of nomination, and then we can vote and proceed with an election. So with that, I open this for discussion and nominations.
Ryan, you've done such a wonderful job the last couple of years. What are your thoughts on continuing? I would make a motion and nominate you to continue.
I would accept said nomination if neither yourself or Mr. Wynn was interested in having their hand as chair. I certainly don't mind, and it's a good experience. At the same time, I do talk a lot. So, like I said, if that's what you would have me do, I'm happy to. But I know that Mr. Wynn and yourself both have significant professional experience and would be more than capable of steering the ship, so to speak.
Well, I appreciate that. What are your thoughts, Mr. Wynn?
I would be delighted to have Ryan continue as chairman as well. The only concern I would have would be, I suppose, a little bit technical, and that is whether or not he's allowed by the city to do that, because our terms are set at, I think, 5 years. So I think there has to be some sort of exception made if that's the case. But other than that, I'd love to have Ryan continue on.
Isn't the election yearly?
Yes.
Okay.
It's just for 1 year.
We should be good. Ryan, how much time do you have left in your 5-year?
Julie says that my sentence ends in 2023.
2023?
I think so, or maybe it was 2022. Either way, I have another year of community service on the board before I'm let go for good behavior. So
Well,
so neither of you have interest, huh? All right.
I just feel like you've done a great job, and I'd like to nominate you again to serve next year as well.
I second that nomination.
I appreciate that. Well, I am more than willing to accept that nomination and continue duties as chair if that's what you would like me to do. That being said, if both of you are on the board at the end of this year, I look forward to nominating one of you for 2022. All right, and with that, if there's no additional nominations, then I'm happy to accept a motion and I can begin a vote on that.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All right, so motion put forth to perform an election. Oh, we also need a vice chair. I missed that last year. George, how much interest do you have in being vice chair? If I happen to win the lottery or get hit by a bus or move out of state.
You can vote on the motion.
Oh, we can do that. Oh, you're right. Thank you, Julie. All right. So all in favor of electing Ryan Castro, myself, as chair for the year 2021, please indicate with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? That election motion carries 3-0. And that makes myself chair, and we move on to a vice chair election. As I was saying before, Julie offered me some solid correction. George, would you have any interest in vice chairing?
Well, not much. How long has Mr. Heiner been on this board? Has he had an opportunity to serve as chair or vice chair?
I'd be willing to look at being vice chair. I've been, I don't know how long I have left, Julie, but I think I have 2 or 3 years anyway, so I'm happy to do it. Ryan and George.
Sounds great to me. I would love to nominate you, Bill, as vice chair for the position for sure.
I second that nomination.
Shall we take a vote on that? Okay. All in favor of Bill Heiner as vice chair for 2021 for Board of Adjustment, indicate with an aye.
Aye.
And any opposed with a nay. And the motion carries. Mr. Heiner, I want to be really clear. Did you support the motion?
Well, yes, can I vote for myself? I guess
Absolutely. And as it stands, the motion is 2-0. I think for the record, we'll conduct it one more time.
Okay.
Just to ensure that we get that properly recorded. All in favor of putting Mr. Bill Heiner as vice chair for West Jordan Board of Adjustment, indicate with an aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed with nay? And that motion carries 3-0, which sounds much better than 2-0. And with that, we have elected chair and vice chair for 2021. And we move on to item number 2 of our agenda, which is approval of the minutes for December 8th, 2020. And with that, I'll open the meeting for discussion of these minutes or accept a motion to approve them either way.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
I would second that motion, just with the comment that Ryan, I thought you and city staff, I thought you handled that touchy situation very well. So I commend you for that.
Great. All right, and a motion to approve the minutes from December 8th, 2020. Please indicate with an aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed. And the motion carries to approve minutes from December 8th, 2020, 3-0. And we move on to item number 3, which for documentation, item number 3 was originally the Utah Fusion All-Stars variance. And this application has been withdrawn. And so we will move on to item number 4. Just wanted to express appreciation for the applicant for the genuineness they brought to the meeting and the professionalism, and really appreciate their contributions to the city as a citizen. With that, we'll move to item number 4. Item number 4, applicant Brennan Aldridge variance, 2684 West Jordan Meadows Lane. Variance to the minimum lot area for a corner lot in the R-1-10 zone. Brennan Aldridge, applicant, and city staff planning is Mark Forsyth and Nathan Nelson. We will open here and allow for the applicant to present to city staff. And to our applicant, Mr. Aldridge, if you wouldn't mind just stating your name and address for the record. And please help us by walking through the requirements of this variance and helping us to understand the justification for it.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yep, you sound great.
Okay, I'm Brennan Aldridge. My home address is actually near the subject property address, which is 7488 South, 2540 West, here in West Jordan, 84084. So would you like me to explain the petition for the variance?
Yeah, absolutely. This is your opportunity to walk us through the request, the variance, your understanding of why its application should be approved by the board based on the criteria that we have to judge by. So really, this is your opportunity to shine and give us everything you've got so we can best understand it.
Sure. Can I start by asking if the board has read through the staff report, just so I know where to start?
Yes.
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 Okay. I feel like the staff report does a very fine job of explaining the project and the need for the variance. I don't know that I can say it any better, but I guess in a nutshell, we're looking at a 0.66 acre property that's got an existing home on it built in 1971. It's a mid-century modern style, quite different from the rest of the neighborhood with a large setback. It's inconveniently situated right on the center of the lot, making it difficult to subdivide and still meet the existing zoning requirement R110B. However, without too much of an exception, I think we can make it work. I've drawn up, there you are, a property line that jogs about midway through the property. So we get 5-foot frontage, as you see dimensioned there. And then we go north with the property line and we jog back west around the existing home at the 8-foot setback. So this gives us approximately a 10,000 square foot property. I was unaware of the 11,000 square foot requirement for a corner lot when I first did this. We're asking for a variance on that corner lot requirement, adding the extra 1,000 square feet. So I feel that that's justified because, well, 10,000 isn't really that of the zoning. In fact, it meets the zoning for an interior lot, just not for a corner. To make it meet the 11, as you can see from the drawing here, what we would have to do is take the proposed property line there in between the two home structures and move it east, which would further obstruct the existing home. So in order to not make too awkward of a lot and to allow convenient access to the existing home, we're asking that 10,000 square feet be acceptable for the new parcel.
Do you happen to know what the surrounding, I'm sorry, I'm going to hold off my question here. Do you have any additional information to present us?
Well, I guess I could go into a little bit more detail. It's just a repeat of what's in my application and the staff report, but I'll use the time if you're going to give it to me.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I think one of the important parts here is that so the documentation is great, and I agree that the staff report is certainly supportive. Kind of like we talked about in the pre-meeting, the burden still rests on you to help us best understand, especially in the actual board meeting where you meet the criteria. So please feel free to take the time. Certainly not asking you to read the staff report to us, but definitely to help us understand the points.
Yeah, no worries. So if you wouldn't mind, whoever's in charge of the screen flipping back to the site plan. There we go. Thank you. So to prove the hardship, I guess, or to further explain that, the home is clad with brick and natural wood, the existing home. So it was suggested at one point to demo the garage and to reconstruct it. It would be very difficult to match the brick and the wood finish materials that are on the existing home. If we did that, you might not know, brick is a unique color depending on where it was quarried and what temperature it was fired at. So it's always a challenge to match brick. So We feel like it would be very difficult to reconstruct the garage in a different location and make it look like it matches the home. The craftsmanship and materials now are much different than they were back then. The other thing is leaving the garage where it is and extending that east property line, proposed property line further east. It would make it difficult to get in and out of the garage. Because the home is set so far back, backing on an angle for that distance and then squaring up with the road would be challenging there. Thank you. That's a very good drawing to show it. So the red line there, drawn by Mark Forsyth from the Planning Division, shows what we would have to do to get the 11,000 square feet. And it just makes it very difficult to access the existing garage. He has crosshatched there on the existing home a square that shows where he proposes that the garage would move to if we relocated it. There's a couple of problems with that. The one that I've already explained with materials and craftsmanship matching. But the other is there's a breezeway. You might not be able to read the print at this scale, but there's a breezeway between the home and the garage. And something that was not taken into consideration is that breezeway actually has a concrete wall that is the outer wall of a bunker within the home. So you probably know that around this era, it was popular to build bomb shelters in your home. And maybe not terribly common, but this home actually has two of them. And one of them does, it does encumber the breezeway. So to move the garage up to the home like he's shown here isn't as practical as it might appear on paper with that bomb shelter coming up above grade. It looks from the outside just like maybe a concrete porch or patio, but it is in fact a thick walled concrete bunker. So that would be one obstacle as well to moving the home. So we feel like we've presented an option that is practical and that meets the intent of the city's code, which one of the goals, I believe, is to offer single family housing. And this is, a single family home on a lot that's otherwise underutilized. And without the variance, it would be difficult to utilize for the reasons I've explained. Sorry about the background noise.
It's great. I'll open this up to the board. Board members, do you have any questions for the applicant while they are actively participating?
Yes, I've got 2 or 3 questions, if I may.
Sure.
Mr. Aldridge, are you the current occupant of the existing home?
No, but we are renovating the existing home with the intent to resell it.
Okay. And so you would resell the existing home, and then the proposed home is something you are proposing to build after that?
Correct.
Okay. Do I understand correctly? I think I read in the staff report that the existing home was built before there were any code restrictions there. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Now, I drove past this piece of property a few days ago to take my own look at it. And one thing I don't see reflected in the drawings here is that sort of semicircular driveway that goes in there now. Yeah, you see it better in that aerial map. It appears to me that would have to be torn out in order to make any plan work. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So what you're proposing envisions taking out that driveway as part of the whole process and redoing driveways.
Right, right. And my drawing shows the proposed new driveway, which would be more of a direct access straight into the garage rather than that swoop from the west.
Okay. Well, those are the only questions I have at the moment.
One of my questions revolves around criteria number 2. There are special circumstances attached to the property that do not generally apply to other properties in the same district and relate directly to the hardship complained of. Help me understand where this property is unique from neighboring properties.
Sure. Yeah. So my comment there related to the setback. This one is quite a bit further back than the other properties. I understand the intent of the code now is to have the homes closer to the street so that the yard in front of the home is better maintained, or sorry, is more easily maintained because of a smaller area. That if people want to let their weeds grow in the backyard, they can, and it's not as detrimental to the neighborhood. But getting more to your question, what that means is that when you're backing your car out of your garage or your driveway, it's a lot longer shot, which is fine if it's straight. It's easy to back straight. It's hard to back angular. And so I think that it would diminish the full enjoyment of the property to make it impractical and unsafe to back out of by requiring the angular backing. So if it were any other property, it would be, 20, 30 feet closer to the street. That would be less of an issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Any additional questions from the board?
No.
No, I don't have any at this time.
Okay. With that, I think, Mr. Aldridge, if you don't have any additional remarks, we'll have you virtually sit down and allow the city the opportunity to present as well.
All right, thank you, Chair. So I'll just kind of go over real quick, just some additional information, but just to kind of start with the zoning and provide some context there. So this is located in R110B zone, which is a single family residential zone. The future land use map of the general plan for this area calls for medium density residential, which allows for a range of 8,000 to 10,000 square foot lots, or in terms of dwelling units, you're looking at 3.1 to 5 dwelling units per acre. So the ordinance requirement that we're looking at specifically is section 13-5B-3A and B, which specifically state that all lots in the R110 zone have to have at least 10,000 square feet in area. But section B states that corner lots have to have 1,000 square feet greater than that minimum. So in this case, the minimum lot size would be 11,000 square feet for the corner lot. So some of the lot sizes and shapes in the neighborhood, you can kind of see here, pretty much everything or almost every lot in there is pretty square shaped, pretty close to that 10,000 square foot minimum. In fact, we actually found in looking through some of the subdivision plats and city records that there's about 5 corner lots in this Jordan Meadows neighborhood right next to subject property that are actually less than 11,000 square feet. Most likely because the ordinances were different at the time that was subdivided, and so those are kind of considered legal non-conforming as to the lot size. Also, you'd notice the neighbor to the north there is kind of the outlier in terms of size and comparability to the subject lot. Both of those are just over half an acre, and so the lot to the north, you can kind of see that house situated a little bit closer to 2700 West. It leaves a lot of room in the back, and so we took took a look at that to see if that would be a possibility to subdivide. Not that they plan on doing that now or maybe in the future, but just to see if it was possible. But it turns out that they would have enough to meet the stem width requirements and the lot size requirements there, likely without a variance. So, so just as kind of a comparison, the general plan, we went through and just kind of found some of the points and policies that are applicable to this case and to single family residential in general. And basically the four most prominent ones that we found was density of infill should be similar to the surrounding development. We discourage any divisions of lots that are detrimental to, the character of the neighborhood. Want to provide opportunities for single-family residential homes, particularly with the housing crunch that we're in right now. That's kind of become more relevant. And then to encourage a range of lot sizes, generally within the framework provided by the general plan's future land use map. So, and then last, we just kind of want to go over the purpose of the requirement, which is really basically just to provide enough room, one, so they can provide enough room for that corner side yard setback, which is 20 feet, which tends to be quite a bit. So it pushes the house off the street further. And then, of course, to allow sufficient buildable area within those setbacks. So basically, we just want to make sure that the lot is going to be large enough to fit the home that's, or the size of the home that's required. And so the size of the home that's required in an R110B zone, there's a minimum living space requirement, which is shown here in the table. So the applicant's proposing more of a Rambler style home. So their minimum living space would be 2,200 square feet, and that would include a basement, whether finished or unfinished. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
The setbacks on the south side, that's 30 feet, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And then
So
20 feet on the west side?
20 feet on the west side, yep.
And then you still, the way it looked to me, you still had room on both. Was it an 8 foot? Is that what it was?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
In fact, that kind of leads me to one point I should point out. And this was kind of brought to my attention the other day by a citizen call. But anyway, they had some concerns on whether or not a 10,000 square foot lot could actually fit on that west side. She thought it was a little bit tight. And so I went back and kind of looked at it again and took some measurements off the city's parcel map. So this is a parcel map that's provided on our website and allows for some measurements that can be taken. But now keep in mind that the aerial and the parcel data don't always perfectly 100% line up, but they do tend to be somewhat close depending on where you are in the city. But the measurements I took from this, basically from where it shows a property line there on the west to the house, was about 68 feet. And so 68 feet is actually what they're showing from the west property line to their east property line on that corner lot. So it kind of leaves a discrepancy of that 8 feet there. So I went back and kind of measured it out just to kind of put that polygon about 8 feet off the house, and just kind of match as closely as I could to what the applicant shows in their site plan. And it looks to be the shape of this would be about 9,000 square feet. So So I think we just want to make sure that that what's on that proposed site plan is going to be accurate. And when they do apply, when the applicant does apply for subdivision, they will need to submit a subdivision plat that's prepared by a licensed professional surveyor. So that should be well, more specifically, that will be checked at that time. But I just kind of wanted to call attention to that and let everyone know.
So what you're saying then is that it could be a little bit less?
It's possible, yes. Again, I'm not a surveyor, but
Right.
yeah, just kind of from those crude measurements, it's something that I think should be looked at.
Well, like you said, the survey will answer that question anyway, I think.
Correct.
Thank you, Mark. Anything additional you'd like to present?
No, that's all I had.
Great. With that, we will give the applicant, Mr. Aldrich, the opportunity to respond or provide additional information now that the city has responded. Oh, you know, actually, I'm
The
gonna
public hearing.
yeah, I'm gonna pause you for a second there. Hold on just a second, Mr. Aldrich. Let's see here. So I see that we have some attendees and participants. I will open this meeting to public commentary and give you just a moment. If you have an interest, Mr. Aldridge will include you in final response in just a moment. But if you're a public attendee and you'd like to comment, you can do so now. Just raise your hand in Zoom. There's the little Zoom icon for attendees or hand icon for attendees. Let us know. We'll give you just a minute here. Okay. Seeing that it appears there are no members of the public hoping to comment on this application, we'll ask the applicant if they'd like the opportunity to respond to the city.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So Mark brought that discrepancy to my attention a little bit earlier today. I got on the phone right away with my civil engineer. They were in the midst of compiling my survey and did me a favor and expedited it. So here's our findings. There is a discrepancy. When I measured first, I took my tape out and I measured from west face of garage to back of walk with my tape. And I created my drawing based on that dimension. That dimension at the time read 76 feet inches. The survey came back at 75.2. So there's about a foot difference. So my assumption that the property line was at the back of walk was incorrect. It's 1 foot off the back of walk. So the net effect is less square footage than I expected. So although it's more than what Mark is estimating, for a couple of reasons that I'll get into, it is less than 10,000, but it's still well within the medium density range of 8 to 10,000. In fact, well within the upper half, close to 9,700. So one reason that I think Mark is coming up with a different number is, as he explained to you, the overlay of the parcel lines on the aerial image is always exactly perfect. For example, in this image here, you see the yellow boundary line on the west.
Mr. Aldridge, you have gone silent. And now you've left the meeting completely. We will pause for just a moment to allow.
I'm back.
Oh, look at that. Wow, that was really
Sorry.
impressive.
If you hear any horses in the background, I'm at my daughter's riding lessons, so I apologize. I'm on a tethered connection. It's not that great. Anyway, so yeah, there was a mistake there, and the lot is smaller than we intended it to be. But again, it's still very close to the 10,000 mark and well within the medium density range. So I just wanted to bring that out. Oh, the other reason that I think Mark is measuring a little bit differently for you is that the survey found that the fence line is actually, the neighboring fence lines are 3 to 6 feet encroaching on this property, which was an interesting find for us.
On the north side?
On the north side, yeah. And you'll notice the parcel directly to the north on the west is much smaller than the R110 zone. And it was just explained to me that was created prior to the zoning enforcement in this area. And so it does make me wonder if they were looking for a few extra feet when they put their fence line up. But at the end of the day, the parcel is, as we've divided it, if we leave the proposed boundary line where it is and we correct the west existing boundary line, leaves us closer to 9,800, 9,700 square feet.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Aldridge. Any additional things that you'd like to present or remarks you'd like to make before we close the meeting for public input?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I live on this city block, and we built our home there when the lot was subdivided. It was an old farmland that was subdivided, and we've loved living in West Jordan. I drive past this corner almost every day, and the home has been vacant for more than 3 years. And I've just been waiting for an opportunity to improve it because, the former owner, she passed away, and the family has been taking care of the home to the best of their ability, but the lawn has been bad, and the home has continued to deteriorate, and it's got a lot of deferred maintenance. And so we're just looking for an opportunity to not only improve that home, but also to add another one to an inventory that is very low and overpriced right now, and hopefully bring another family into the neighborhood. So that's all I have to say.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Aldridge. George or Bill, do either of you have any additional questions for the applicant before we move on?
No, the other measurement that Mark had was a little bit over 10,000. Is that my understanding?
The measurement I had was, let me go back to it. So it's around 9,000 square feet for the lot. But this is assuming, when I measured that, I did measure that kind of that gap between the back of the sidewalk and that west property line, and it looks like that was about 3 feet. So if the property line is, according to the applicant's survey, is even closer, then yeah, that would probably bump up the square footage. So
would bump up the square footage from
Right.
where we were before.
Well, from this measurement.
The only thing I'm concerned about is if we approve a variance for 10,000 square feet, Like the application is very specific. We're modifying the requirements from 11,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet. If we get to 9,800 square feet, then this variance does not meet the applicant's needs. And right now, that's very concerning to me. Being that the language is specific in the application, I'm concerned that approval of this application would not meet the needs of the applicant. Mark, do you have any input on that? And then I'll go right back to Mr. Aldridge before we carry on.
Not specifically, no. You know, it's more information is always better than less. So it might help to have a prepared survey just to find out exactly where that house is on the lot in relation to the property lines. And so, you know, not to make any specific recommendations or anything, but one idea would be to maybe table it until we get something a little bit more specific and official, and then make a decision based on that.
Yeah, thank you for that input. Mr. Aldridge, so like I'll just be really clear as kind of as a citizen and as a representative of our board here. I mean, our goal is to fulfill our obligations to the city and the law that's been prescribed, and to you as an applicant, a resident. And I'm concerned because by your own numbers, you mentioned that it's going to get you to 97 or 9,800 square feet. And I'm honestly, just as a person, I'm terrified that we put you through this expense and effort, and then we're not close enough to actually make it legally viable for you anyway. What are your thoughts on that based on the numbers that you've given us?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So this came to my attention today. Obviously, we would have submitted a different application if we were aware of it at the time. I can see your concern, and I think that it's a good one. I think that it would be. Would it be acceptable to amend the application to the 9,800 square feet?
No, Ryan, that's not even on the table. That can't happen. So that would go back to talking about you'd be making a legislative decision. So I think that I'd focus on the hardship, and if additional information would prove that hardship, it may be appropriate to table it until the next meeting, since there's a lot of new information that's come. So
there was mention a moment ago of a range of 9,800 to 10,000.
8,000 to 10,000.
Like I'm a little lost on where that might fit into this discussion.
it does not. That is, and I'll answer. That is a range in the general plan for the land use map. The zoning ordinance is very, very rigid on the 10,000 square foot lot. That's a minimum. The lots can be larger than 10,000 square feet, but they can't be smaller.
So I think I'm. So right now, I am of the opinion, this is, again, I'm speaking out loud, not in attempting to persuade, make any ruling or otherwise, right? And I'd like to get Mr. Tingey's take on this, but I'm of the opinion that we're not entirely sure that this application will suit the applicant's needs, and the effort is probably, it's potentially not valuable to the applicant. And so I'm trying to understand the proper process moving forward, either to table this until next month and allow the applicant more time to gather the information he needs to find out whether the application is appropriate for his needs, or what our options are as a board to make sure that we fulfill the needs of both city and applicant. Mr. Tingy, do you have a suggestion or opinion on a good way to proceed?
It's really up to the board. You could do what you had suggested, table it until further information is gathered, so that the board can make a more informed decision based upon other on additional information, given that the information that came about today, or that was made aware today. That's really, it's either that or approve or deny. Those are your options.
I feel like we're in a similar situation where it might be, well, yeah. Mr. Nguyen, Mr. Heiner, what are your suggestions? I'm of the mind that we either allow Mr. Aldridge to run back and collect some more data to find out if this is the right application for him.
I tend to agree. I have had a personal experience in Midvale, and I came up about 18 inches short on one side, and I after the survey, and it makes a difference. So I think we need to give everybody an opportunity to see what it actually is. I'm wondering, the north line, you said that fence is about 6 feet inside the line.
Yes, on the east side and about 3 feet on the west side.
Let me just make sure I've got.
But the measurements are taken to the parcel boundary, not to the fence line. So that wouldn't change the equation. May I make a comment?
Absolutely. I'd love to know what you'd like to see happen, as ultimately it's your dime and you're bearing the risk.
Thanks. Yeah.
After we move on from this step, whatever you choose, if you choose to proceed forward, we'll move forward with the facts that we have and then either approve or deny based on what we have in further discussion. So it's up to you.
Well, let me first ask this. What does it entail for you to table it? Does that mean that I have to reapply and pay another $850?
No, and so that's one of the benefits of not withdrawing your application at this particular moment, is that gives you the opportunity to save the cash and get a proper survey done or whatever it is you choose to do to get the right information that you need to bring back here. And then we can resume this discussion and take it through the points of law as needed without putting in a new application. So you have that benefit. Now, what I don't know, and you'll have to follow up with city staff afterwards, is if you find that you should have put an application in for 9,500 square feet or 9,000 or whatever, whether that's a brand new application or not, that's something that you'll need to work out with them. That's not something that the board can help you with.
Yeah. So frankly, I'm not entirely sure which route I want to take either. So here's what I see my options are. I have the option of pressing forward with the 10,000 square foot variance. I've already run through all of the options. I know for me that means I have to move the the proposed property line further east and further encumber the access to the existing home. That's not my first choice, but it means that I could potentially get approved today. And then I could show on the updated site plan that new boundary line, which conceptually is equal to what I've shown you, but technically has slightly different boundaries, but same idea, same concept. I think I've got to move that line about another 5 foot 5 inches to get to pick up the extra footage that I need to make it 10,000. So that's appealing to me because I feel like there's a good chance it will be approved tonight if I did that. I would rather get the variance for the 9,500 or 96 or 9,700 square feet that would make this a better project in that the lot would be less awkward, the encumbrance on the existing home would be less. But see, that's less of a sure thing for me because that means I'm asking for more of a deviation. And I'm less certain that the staff or the board would be as accepting of that sort of an application. So that's kind of the bind I'm in.
Understanding that we're in no position to find in either direction at the moment until we close the meeting for public comment and actually have a full-on discussion about it, right?
Yeah, so I don't know if, I haven't been through this process before, and I don't know if the board would be likely to accept a lesser square footage. As was mentioned, it falls within the intent of the overall plan of the medium zone density, the 8 to 10,000 square feet, but it is a greater deviation from the R110.
So, Chair, can I interject something before we go too far down this road? That's not the board's purview. That's the city council's purview. That'd be completely that'd require a zone change to go anything less than 10,000 square feet. This corner lot, extra 1,000 feet was established for new subdivisions to make it so that there's basically two, facades that show well in the city, the corner side and the front. I do believe that the Board of Adjustment has some variability there to the ordinance if hardship is proven, but I would not even be talking about going less than 10,000 square feet because that's a legislative decision and but not within your authority. So.
Okay. Mr. Tingy, do you agree with Mr. Gardner's assessment? Okay. He visually nods his head yes. Let the record show that. So in the which case, Mr. Aldridge, as a board, I'll just ask you again. If you want to collect some more information and see whether you can make that 10,000 cut and that works for you, I'll ask these gentlemen here if they want to propose to stay for one more month, or we can press forward now. Which would you like to see happen, and we can discuss it.
So I would like to see if the board will approve the application as is, with the contingency that of course, the survey prepared by a licensed engineer shows the 10,000 square feet, which would mean an adjustment to the property line, the proposed property line.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Aldrich. I think we will now close the meeting to public comment and move forward here with our discussion. I will open the meeting for Board of Adjustment discussion. Mr. Nguyen, Mr. Heiner, are you happy to proceed forth based on the facts that we have?
Yes.
Yes, I'm happy to proceed forth.
Okay, great. Well, general discussion items before we walk through variance criteria and look at the findings of fact. Just general discussion or thoughts on this application.
So
Well, go ahead.
I want to make sure I understand what Mr. Aldridge just proposed. He said that he wanted to move forward with the current application at 10,000 square feet, contingent upon the survey, an official survey that would meet that requirement. Is that what I heard?
That was my understanding.
That is as I understand it as well.
Okay. And so that would mean that if the survey does not come in with the proper square footage and the proper setbacks, then this application will be denied.
No, so the application will be either approved or denied based on the facts that have been provided to us. So the assumption is that the facts provided to us indicate that he'll have a 10,000 square foot lot, and we can choose to approve that. Now, if his surveyor rolls out and comes to the determination that based on the plan put forward, he ends up with less than 10,000 square feet, that plan can't be put in place and the lot isn't subdivided
Right.
as stated.
Got it.
So the variance will attach to this property and be approved or denied tonight regardless.
Okay.
So with that, let's just walk through the criteria here and see where we end up. So I'm just going to read this and kind of jog our brains a little bit. Literal enforcement of this title would cause an unreasonable hardship for the applicant that is not necessary to carry out the general purpose of this title. The Board of Adjustment shall not find an unreasonable hardship if the hardship is self-imposed or economic. To determine whether or not enforcement of this title would cause unreasonable hardship, the Board of Adjustment shall not find unreasonable hardship unless the alleged hardship is, number one, located on or associated with the property for which the variance is sought. To my understanding, that criteria, when 100% is met, we're talking about said property. And I feel like we can move on to number two.
I'm with you.
Comes from circumstances peculiar to the property and not from conditions that are general to the neighborhood. So I'll open this item up for discussion to discuss.
Repeat that again, if you would.
Comes from the circumstances peculiar to the property and not from conditions that are general to the neighborhood.
Well, I was thinking earlier that we have, as Mark stated, we have a few lots in there, corner lots that do not and are not, that don't make the 11,000 square foot minimum. Does that fall into criteria too? Them, with the neighbors enjoying the same benefits on a corner lot that's less than 11,000 square feet? That would be my input or question, I guess. If that has to do with that criteria too.
Yeah, for me, if you look, the lot is just large enough to be subdivided if it were not for the placement of that existing house. And it is very unique in that this is where we had the discussion of the home being placed so far back on the lot. Its placement is very unique to the surrounding homes. Especially for a corner lot.
To me, it seems relevant that the placement of the existing home was done before there were zoning ordinances that applied to that neighborhood. And that's why we see most of the other lots there are smaller because they were built later under a different code than that corner lot. So that makes it peculiar to the property. So I think that criterion is met.
I would agree that the criteria is met. And again, this is not a voting portion of this item. So this is more discussion and, as we find fact here. Any other remarks here?
No, I tend to agree about the peculiarity of the lot. If that's what if that's what that criteria too means, and I'm good with that.
Okay. Let's see here. There are special circumstances attached to the property that do not generally apply to other properties in the same district and relate directly to the hardship complained of. So the city staff reports points out that in order to make this happen, and I can quote from here because it helps solidify the point in my mind. In order to meet the lot size requirements, the proposed corner lot would likely have an angled front yard that is wider than the width of the northern half of the lot, which is an abnormal lot configuration in comparison to the other squared shaped lots within the Jordan Meadows subdivision. So that does seem to be kind of a unique circumstance if we were to subdivide. The other square-shaped lots have front yards that are smaller and more manageable, which require less maintenance than an unnecessarily large front yard. Thank you again. I was just reading that directly out of the staff report. I found it very helpful in helping me find my words.
I believe that criterion number 2 is met.
I think I'm good with that too.
And move on to the next criteria. Granting the variance is essential to the enjoyment of a substantial property right possessed by other property in the same district.
I think that's where I was going with number 2 or number whatever. But this I think falls right into that, with the other corner lots being less than 11,000 square feet in the subdivision. So to me, that seems to meet that criteria.
So the thing that stood out most to me was the remark by Mark, in which he indicated that the only other lot that is as large and oddly shaped as this lot would be able to subdivide without a variance. And I found that to be a very pertinent finding of fact. It's just a really important point because it speaks directly to granting the variance is essential to the enjoyment of a substantial property right possessed by others in the same district. If you look at this aerial photo here, it's clear that of the nearby properties, this property is the only one that is limited by its circumstances that would prevent it from enjoying something that the other lots easily enjoy, even the only other lot that is both oddly shaped and excessively large compared to surrounding properties. And that seems really relevant to me.
I agree with that.
Criteria number 4, the variance will not substantially affect the general plan and will not be contrary to the public interest. So I think the way and again, this is my own interpretation, but the way I read this one is, are we doing the public a disservice or the intention of the city a disservice by looking at this variance and approving it?
Well, in my opinion, we'd be doing the public a favor to allow this. Because as I say, I drove past that piece of property the other day, and any improvements that could be made to it would be, I think the neighborhood would welcome.
Do
I
you
agree
feel
with
like
that. We do need more inventory too, and it would be one more home for a family.
speaking directly to criteria number 4, do you feel like it substantially affects the general plan?
No.
The intentions of the plan here?
I think the variance does not substantially affect the general plan.
I agree with George on that.
Cool. And then lastly, the spirit of this title is observed and substantial justice done.
I think the answer to that is yes.
Again, I liked the remarks in the staff report. Kind of talks a little bit about the minimum lot size requirement, and it just mentions that minimum lot size requirement is there to ensure that a sufficiently large home is able to fit within the buildable area. And then it proceeds to detail the appropriate square footage, kind of ending that the home will eventually have more than 3,000 square feet of living space, which exceeds the minimum amount of space required by the zoning ordinances. So if the purpose of that specific ordinance is to provide a certain amount of livable space, it sounds to me like the spirit of that title is observed, and I would agree that justice would be done.
I
love
agree with that too.
Substantial justice. It sounds so patriotic. I feel good about it.
It's not perfect justice, it's just substantial.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, that explains it better.
Yeah.
I hate to backtrack, but can we go back to criteria number 1? And I'm going to ask staff for some comments and clarification here. Part of criteria number 1 says the Board of Adjustment shall not find an unreasonable hardship if the hardship is self-imposed or economic. And I'm questioning here how you describe and define self-imposed or economic. Mr. Aldridge said that he wants to improve this property. And obviously to do so, he's going to have to put a lot of his own money into it. So therefore, doesn't that make this a self-imposed or economic consideration?
I think that
since you're addressing that to city staff, let's hear from Mark a little bit, and then we'll see where we end up.
Okay. Yeah, I think this just kind of goes back to Larry's description back in our pre-meeting, just kind of going over similar to his example of the lot on a hillside. Well, obviously the owner didn't create the hillside. It was pretty much there when the lot was either created or long before then. But yeah, basically, as kind of a contrast, usually if a self-imposed situation would be more like if, and this is just kind of a hypothetical example, but if someone were to, let's say, put a shed within a setback line, get caught, and then apply for a variance and saying they need a hardship, well, it's like, well, you put the shed there in the first place, so that's obviously a self-imposed hardship. That's just kind of one example. And then an economic example, again, I'll kind of use the example from the previous meeting, but if someone were to subdivide this property to get, basically their only reason for subdividing it would be to save money, or that's their primary reason, then when there's no clear physical hardship or anything like that, then I think that would certainly count as an economic reason. Does that make sense?
I think it also goes back to the lot size that we discussed, because if a applicant were to go into an area and say, well, they want 10,000 square foot lots, but it's more advantageous for me to have the Board of Adjustment approve, put a variance and give me 9,000 square foot lots, and then over 9 lots, I got another lot. And so that would be an economic consideration here. I think where this is an infill development, the amount of property is there, but for whatever reason, the house was placed in a location that isn't conducive to dividing up in perfect rectangles 10,000 square foot lots. So the self-imposed, mostly everything self-imposed unless it's created by nature. And so, but I think in this case, it's not, he didn't put the house there where it's at. He didn't create that. So I think you could use that as an argument. So
if I could just follow up on that from my own perspective, as I understand it, self-imposed is also, our financial burden is also not something we're not supposed to take into consideration. So in this example, and the staff report talks about it, we absolutely could ask the applicant, well, like, hey, you can just demolish that garage, put it somewhere else, right? Like that is something that we can ask that be done and suggested. And if the applicant comes back and says that's going to cost me a fortune, costing a fortune is not part of our criteria. And that speaks directly to, it can't be a financial burden. However, in this case, the findings and the evidence that we had placed forth are such that they flat out said, even if we have them tear it down, it's still not going to be conducive to what we're looking for with the neighborhood. And it's not going to fit within the plan, and it's not going to be the rights that the rest of the neighborhood enjoys. And there's an inconsistency there. So there is no benefit in this particular case to saying, hey, just rip that thing down. Financial burden or not, we don't gain what we're looking for in that situation. And so that's kind of the perspective I'm coming from as far as financial burden and self.
Still dependent upon the survey. The survey could indicate that, yeah, you do need to take part of the house or part of the garage off.
And that is, and I agree. And that's a decision that the applicant has asked us to move forward. And as we grant, approve, or deny this variance, that decision sticks with the property, and how they execute on it is up to them.
I appreciate that discussion. That helps. I probably will have the same question again in future meetings, but for now I'm good.
Honestly, for the purposes of finding fact consistently, you're welcome to ask that question as often as you want. I feel like it's going to produce a consistent outcome and make sure that we go back to that substantial justice being done. With that, I would be happy to accept a motion on this if either of you are comfortable to put forth a motion.
Based upon the Board of Adjustment findings that the applicant has met all variance criteria required by the state and city codes, I move that the Board of Adjustment approve the variance for the applicant's property located at 2684 West Jordan Meadows Lane, reducing the minimum corner size lot requirement from 11,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet.
Motion put forward to approve the variance by Mr. George Wynn.
I have a question on it. So you're saying that we're saying in that motion that it must be 10,000 square feet.
Correct.
Okay. I'll second that motion then.
Seconded by Mr. Heiner. Can take a vote on this. I think I might have one more question. Give me just a second to formulate. If you haven't noticed, I have to think for a second. Sometimes it takes me a minute. So understanding that you've put forward this motion, and I am happy to take a vote on it. I'm wondering if that is contingent on the site plan that's been put forward and shown to us. Is that correct?
I don't feel like I seconded that
So,
way.
Julie, can you bring up the site plan? Or is it Mark that's driving? I don't know who's driving. Somebody's driving.
So
if I understand your question right, Mr. Castro, the motion is doesn't care about the site plan. The motion only cares about 10,000 square feet.
Right.
And if that's approved, then the owner and developer of the property can do whatever they want as long as it's within that 10,000 square feet and meets the appropriate setbacks and any other ordinances that might apply.
Perfect. And that's what I wanted clarification for. That is
So
my
before we
understanding.
go
as well.
to vote, before we go to vote, can I ask the city to comment on whether or not we got that right?
Larry, can we hear from you on that? Do you
Yes,
feel like
that's
you're the
correct.
right person to answer the question?
That's correct, because it's the variance is for removing the extra 1,000 square feet in the corner lot. It's not altering the square feet of the zone that it's in, and so that is correct. He's still he can have this variance all day, but if it doesn't meet the provisions of the subdivision ordinance, we can't approve it. So.
Great. With that, Mr. Nguyen, Mr. Heiner, could I ask you to put that motion forward one more time? I kind of fell a little bit out of process there, and I want to make sure that we get it right. If you're comfortable.
Based upon the Board of Adjustment findings that the applicant has met all variance criteria required by state and city codes, I move that the Board of Adjustment approve the variance for the applicant's property located at 2684 West Jordan Meadows Lane, reducing the minimum corner lot size requirement from 11,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet.
Motion put forward by Mr. Nguyen,
I'll second that motion.
and motion to approve the variance, seconded by Mr. Heiner. All in favor, please indicate with an audible aye.
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 And any opposed with a nay. And motion to approve the variance carries 3-0. And that concludes that agenda item. And then just to quickly come back to our agenda. That's correct. Can I get a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'm gonna make you suffer. No.
Oh, gee.
I think George and I are waiting for each other. I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Well, I'm going to second it.
All right.
George can sit this one out.
I want further discussion. Just kidding.
Well, yeah, please recant your statement. All right. And with that motion put forward to adjourn the meeting and seconded by Mr. Castro, all in favor indicate aye. Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed with nay. And that adjourns our meeting. Motion carried 3-0. That concludes us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aldrich. to you.
Appreciate the consideration.
All right, thanks again, you guys.
You'll probably have a meeting in February.
Thanks, Julie.
Cool.
Thank you very much, Julie.
My heart kind of went out to the applicant. I had, like I said, I had the same thing happen to a property that I purchased over in Midvale, and I ended up, after the survey, I was 18 inches short. My neighbor wouldn't help me, so I ended up not being able to do it, but it was kind of a heartbreaker. I felt bad for him. I didn't want to turn this one down.